Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, and thanks for being here tonight. We're going to start off the meeting with some communication. We have one letter of resignation.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. We do have a letter of resignation from Victory Hilario. She is stepping back from her position as a paraeducator at the middle school. Her last day was actually today. She wants to thank Chad for being a wonderful administrator, and she also wants to thank the amazing teachers and paraeducators who have been part of her village. She's learned so much from everyone, and she'd like to stay on as a district substitute. So thank you, Victory, for all you have done.
Very much. At this point in the agenda, it is time for the public participation. According to 11 Board of Education bylaws, we allocate up to 30 minutes for public participation, with each individual speaker allocated up to 2 minutes. At this point, are there any members of the public who wish to speak this evening? Seeing none, we'll move along to our consent agenda.
Move to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Motion by Alexis, seconded by Brian. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. Our student representatives report. Hi, Cassidy.
Hi, Cassidy.
So, the elementary school is welfare stories and the hospice 26 and looking forward to the fifth. They're also holding a STEM night November 7th at 6 to 7 p.m. The middle school will start most like going because they have a fun time with their friends and they like supporting their community. Over 92% of students do not believe students sport entries. The other 7% thinks it's okay as long as it's going to the teams. Some students say that they would also like to attend these sporting events if they were free. On the topic of sports, Lyman's cross country team record overall is 6-0. They have placed in the top ranks, multiple invites and conference meets. Their last conference meet is today, just a few hours ago. The boys soccer team is having a great comeback season this year with a record of 5-0 in their division. The 5-3 in the conference, getting second place for most goals scored per game in the ECC. The girls soccer team is having another dominant season, having a division record of 4-0 and conference record of 8-1. Ranking third in ECC, most goals scored per game, and we also had an awareness suicide walk. It was Mackay's Bites senior project, and that's all we have.
Thanks, Cassidy.
Thank you. Any questions? Great. Love hearing the survey responses to things that have been discussing, so thank you so much. All right, that brings brings us to our reports of committees. I'll just start. As you can see, we have a vacancy here. That vacancy will be filled this evening, I believe. So I'm not going to speak too soon, but Board of Selectmen is supposed to be voting in another board member. So we should have full board in November. Okay? All right, we will move along. Dawn, would you like to start with superintendent eval?
Sure. We met tonight to do a final review of the draft evaluation tool, which we agreed to bring. It's on the agenda later. I did want to point out this handy sheet. It was brought up that this would be helpful for board members to have to take notes that will guide us through the mid-year eval and then for the final eval as well. That's all.
Great, thank you, Dawn. Any questions? Okay. Alexis, safety and security negotiations.
No report for negotiations. Safety and security did meet today, discussing overall security in executive session.
Great, thank you. And Danelle, climate, culture, and curriculum and strategic fit.
The only one that met since the last meeting was the climate committee, and I was looking back at the notes that are actually in this packet. I think this committee is a really good one to talk about like the survey results that we got from us and how we can make our culture and climate schools better based on some of the goals. So anyway, started looking at that last week. We discussed new school initiatives to increase attendance at school events, not just athletics. Currently, they're listening on the TV, the live streams, announcements, Facebook page, and their Twitter page. They plan on having a pep rally the week of homecoming, and we'll be hopefully handing out free admission passes as rewards for some things like perfect attendance. We hope to plan some things halftime games like we used to have in the past, or maybe some volunteer ball boys. So there's interest in trying to get that going before it's over. And also we like to invite sending schools, middle schools specifically, to come to Lyman, just like our middle school comes to Lyman before production, like our school will walk over. Just to get them in the building, see what it's like here, and see how it's here. Second item on the agenda is the ticketing policy. We figured we'd take a look at some ticketing policies from other districts and also from CAVE, and we got one from CAVE to guide us to make a couple decisions. And so the very last page or 127-page packet has a ticketing policy in there. And it's in there as a first reading. Brian's comfortable as the policy chair to put in the packet today. Our committee was comfortable with it. We did tweak it a little bit. The policy. So when we read through it, vote on it tonight, first reading. Just note that the survey results show that 92% of the students think that admission should be free. 92% is that all the staff,
facilities.
Okay, facilities met this evening.
First thing we talked about were summer projects. John, this is one of the
Ongoing project for John and his staff, looking at some ceiling tiles at Lyman, some skylights and masonry in the locker rooms. So he will be updating us as he completes these projects. Third on the agenda was the Lyman Auditorium lighting. The material has been ordered, and there is a tentative date of October 24th and 25th for install. This is the final phase of the Lyman Auditorium project, replacing the lights, and that will be in time for the November drama production in November at Lyman. And then the final thing that we talked about this evening was a track resurfacing. 2 quotes came in, one from Field Turf and the other one from Cape and Island. Field Turf was almost $700,000 to resurface the track, and Cape and Island came in just a little bit over $450,000. There were some changes that were requested with this estimate, moving the pole vault with one, and the surface, instead of that dark red, would be a blue surface. So we will be speaking with the town to see what our options are for funding this project, so more information on that will come in the later months. That's it.
Any questions for facility?
I knew the history of it, Cape and Island.
Brian, policy.
We didn't, we met before the last meeting, we had not met again, as Mel pointed out, the ticket policy was added for first read. It's quite short, so it's not a lengthy read, so.
Yep, Brian.
So that policy is from the other committee, correct?
Yes.
Not from the
Well,
policy
it's
sub.
okay, yeah.
Well, right,
Yeah,
but it didn't
yes.
go through the policy subcommittee.
It did not. But it is up for first reading tonight, so it will be a second reading at the next meeting.
Next one.
Okay. Would you prefer policy?
Personally, I don't have an issue with this, but I do think that that's been our practice, like not just any subcommittee submits a policy. So if that's gonna change, that's a different conversation.
No, you bring up a really good point. Go ahead.
This one was so, the feeling was we wanted to try to get it, or the feeling was to try to get it through sooner rather than later, and my thought was that it was so short that, I tend to agree with you, Dawn, that we should have the discussion internally in the policy, but this one was, 6 lines, and after reading through it, and, some others weighed in,
Mhm.
I didn't have, such an issue with it, but I agree with you in practice.
Do we want to consider adding it to a policy, subcommittee agenda before the next, regular meeting for the discussion?
If folks feel strongly that it should be, then yes, as a practice, I agree with what Dawn said. I didn't have an issue with it just because it was so incredibly short, so.
I think we thought we were trying to get it before the basketball season.
That's what I was,
Yeah,
aware of.
Mhm.
so that students can get it for free.
Are you planning on having a policy meeting before the next month? Before the next meeting?
Before our next meeting, yes.
All right, would you put it on the agenda
Sure.
to have a discussion if needed?
Okay.
All right.
Are we still going to do first reading
I think
tonight?
we should, I think we should
Okay.
still do that,
All
but
right.
also put it on the agenda.
Yep, got it.
Okay.
Sure.
But noted.
No, and like I said, I
Yeah.
agree. I agree.
All right. Great, thank you very much. Welcome, Holden. Good news?
Yeah,
Yes, good. What was the score?
6-1.
Okay. Good job. All right, that brings us to our administrators who wish to add to their reports this evening? Okay, seeing none, we'll move along to the report of the superintendent for data and goals report. and
Yeah,
presentation.
so each year we really look forward to developing and introducing our district goals. Our team, as always, worked collaboratively to align their goals with the district strategic plan and also created action steps to support the attainment of the goals. If you can spin yourself around, if you don't mind, you can see on the big board there, we have a nice Canva presentation for you. This Lebanon Board of Ed goal served as our North Star for this work. We're ambitious goals that we've crafted and look forward to pursuing excellence for all. And then our strategic plan, as a reminder, was centered around our core values of growing learners, cultivating leaders, and creating legacies. Goal 1 focuses on growing self-directed learners through a student-centered approach to teaching and learning, and Goal 2 emphasizes cultivating leadership at all levels by establishing structures and systems that empower each individual. And Goal 3 hones in on building a climate and culture that supports creating legacies in our Lebanon Public Schools and beyond. So the structure of this report is going to take our theory of action that's aligned to each goal, and then Rita and our building administrators will dive deeper into what each of those goals look like so far this school year and what their plans are to work towards those goals. So Rita.
So yes, this is, first goal, it's about growing our students, meaning that, what can we do,
MTSS work that we did last year. We're using a software program called that can be carried with them if they get to the high school. Teachers, counselors can look and see, go back in time and see when did they have tier 2 intervention. And along that same line, using some of the new technologies out there as visual tutors for the students. Increasing the use of large language model data analysis by the teachers, so using technology to dive a little deeper into the data, automating some components of assessment and feedback. There's a lot of good virtual assistants and AI chatbots out there that can engage students in dialogue, especially situations where the students need sentence starters, or students who might not necessarily be the people who would like to speak up in front of a class as part of a Socratic seminar. There's digital ways to simulate that same level of engagement, and helping students manage complex projects and project-based learning online.
All right, and for Lyman, we're doing those peer visits as well, develop and implement them based on teachers' goals this year. We're able to put teachers together to borrow strategies from each other and observe each other. Last year we focused a lot on restorative practices, we had professional development, and this year we're moving to inclusion practices. We have several co-taught classes with general ed and special ed teachers, so that differentiation is happening much more in those classrooms, and we're learning from each other during that process. PLC use, our PLCs meet 2 to 3 times a week depending on the schedule. We have an agenda for them. They actually have a summary of everything that they do during each meeting, so that Jay and I can go back and forth with them and guide them through that process. Professional development on best instructional practices like the middle school, which is great since they feed us their students. We're working on getting students more active. Student-centered instruction, teacher is facilitating and the kids are doing their learning. Administration attends para-education meetings because we want to hear what they have to say. We do that monthly. We did it all last year. We'll continue to do that. Provide opportunities for students, field trips, speakers, presentations. I think you've heard that one of our new reading courses, The Nature and Animals, we brought in 3 local farmers for students to talk with and get experience, so they would have that background knowledge when they're reading the novel. So things like that, any type of exposure. And Jay told you about the EB experience, etc. And the last one, student voice, increasing student voice. Now we have a morning show where kids can put things so that everyone knows what's going on. Our students have a ton of energy that we're sharing to kind of spice it up and bring in that spirit.
And finally, our last goal before we hit some data. This is about the creating legacies, so a sense of belonging, right, through personalization, and really a focus on community engagement.
So at LES, really the first step of having that engagement piece is making sure that we have our students are in class and in school every day, that we have that welcoming community, that they want to be here, and we're setting up those early childhood healthy habits of coming to school and making friends and working hard. And so we'll continue on with those attendance interventions and strategies and identifying barriers to attendance. We saw some great progress with chronic absenteeism last year, decreasing it at LES. And along with that too, we're going to be continuing with our family engagement activities and also providing workshops and resources for families. We just had a family workshop for our new reading program, and families were definitely engaged in that workshop.
At LMS, we're also, we mentioned inclusion, which is a huge initiative for us across the high school and middle school. So one of the things that we noticed is that our students based on the percentage of time that they are spending with their non-disabled peers was significantly below what the state average is. And so we have a consultant coming in who's working with both the middle school and the high school in terms of co-teaching and inclusive best practices. We've revamped the schedule, and now our special ed students are being scheduled during their IEP meetings in a much more inclusive way. But that also fundamentally shifts the philosophy in the way that teachers teach when they need to differentiate instruction and modify material and create scaffolded lessons that can supplement the standards that the grade level is typically meeting at that time. So all of our professional development under this district will really is focusing on that and be your.
Okay. One of the things I wanted to highlight in here too is that outreach to the parents, community, and sending towns. So tomorrow, Sue and I are going to sales school to meet with their 8th graders. It's their open house. We're also going with 3 kids that are current seniors who are from Sprague. They're going to join us. And then we're also taking our esports on tour with us. So we're going to be hopefully maybe engaging some of their kids in some Super Smash Brothers or Mario Kart. But it's a good way of showing the kinds of things that we can do at our school. The 3 students that are there are involved in different activities, so they can talk about those things from a student perspective there. Developing pathways, we talked about the EB pathway, but that's not the only one. We are trying to see if we can build upon our CNA course and add something else in there too. I know Andy's been talking to us too about maybe trying to build some kind of educational pathway. So we are looking to grow that to provide more opportunities for our students. Stu had already talked about the video options. That's actually been going over very well. That's a big hit. The student meetings with admin to gain insight on perspectives. We are trying to meet more with our students. We've always had that open door policy, and a lot of students do take advantage of that, but just to put ourselves out there, even more. You've heard about the efforts that are going on, right, to try and get more students to participate. That was some great survey data, you guys shared about, what the students think about trying to go to those events and what might encourage that.
Okay, so as we gathered the data, I wanted to, John had asked a couple last meeting about providing materials in advance, the data presentations, you could take a piece. I hope that you found that helpful. Thank you for sharing that need. And so I'm going to go kind of quickly through it, but feel free to ask questions, and the admin might chime in as well, depending on the data. But the next several slides will be focusing on math, language arts, and science, the NGSS, which are smarter balanced assessments that are required by the state. They are given once a month, so just one data. You always want to remember that. Another suggestion Don has asked is that cohorts in previous years, so you'll see through the slides and in all of the different contents that we try to address that suggestion as well. So this first slide is really about the proficiency of students in math and as well students above grade level. So you can see across all grades, it's good to see that we are above the state average this past year, and we've always been. You'll see that in a future slide. And you'll see across the different grades, and particularly the middle school, there's been an increase of improvement from the previous year. Some variables that we might consider is there's new administration, which has helped some lead the focus. We've also added an instructional coach the last few years, which Eric is here as well. Thank you. There was an incentive. There were a lot of different pieces as to perhaps why the middle school's numbers have increased from the previous year.
And just as a reminder for you all, if you're looking in your packet or on the board, you're tracking diagonally down through the columns. So for example, if you look at 4th grade in 22-23 at 61%, and then that same cohort of kids as fifth graders, going up to 66%. So that's the best way to try to track that.
And you'll see that cohort later. I also wanted to just show you year to year. Here, this is the district, so what they do is called the state average. So again, this is compared to the state, blue, and that we continue to be above the state, and that's a collaboration of all of the grades, and then give us the index. This is the specific colors that go along, and again, illustration with our coaches about this really is all the variables that can be is, remember, this is post-COVID. In 21 and 22, we still have the approval of staff being out for COVID, for students being out for COVID. There are a lot of different variables of attendance in particular that was hit the hardest attendance across students and staff. We did notice one cohort in particular, seems to be the cohort that's improving. If you want to, Andy and I were talking today, it's not linear, it's not at all, it's all over the place. The grade that tends to drive me is that grade that started in grade 3 and 21 and then moved down to grade 5. You can see that one. But again, we continue to be above the state average though, regardless of kind of the messiness of it. Hopefully after a few more years out of the post-COVID, we'll start seeing a little bit more consistency across those cohorts. Of course.
Another kind of hidden data point, if you will, is as we were coming out of COVID, there were a lot more students or families that were exempting their students from taking the assessments. And by definition, the studies are showing the students who are families who are exempting the students from taking the standardized tests are the ones who are also probably infrequently absent as well. So it's not necessarily comparing apples to apples from that first year out of COVID.
There are some pretty stark.
Yeah, the ups and downs.
Yeah, they're, do we have a sense going into, we're, 3 months or whatever into this year. Do we have a sense that we're tracking? Is there a smoothing process? Is there, because, after a point in time, we're not going to be able to, COVID's going to drop off. And it's not going to be, no one's going to, and I don't want to be flippant, because but folks are going to say, well, I don't want to hear about COVID anymore. COVID was 4 years ago, or COVID was 3 years ago. So I guess I'm just asking, do you get the sense that we're tracking on the right path?
So we
or in an upward trend?
With appreciation from the board, approving these kind of things, we've put some major significant things just in the time we go into this position. We have 2 new, right, today, this year's even bringing meeting where we have 2 programs. It tends to take 3 to 4 years for a teacher to really understand a program and implement it with, finesse and all those things that go with that. And then 5 to 10 to kind of see that. So we put also what you've heard from all three buildings is that MTSS, that really direct and explicit instruction, and the SSTs that go with that to find those students. The impact, we were just talking about this Stephanie, that the kids that were, during that time too, there was no birth to 3, there was no all these, so some of those are going to see a more long-term effect because of it. Our job now is to address that. So by supporting instructional coaches, we added a map interventionist to the middle school, right? We added one at the elementary last school. We kind of were able to relay some teachers to really address with the grants, just in the midst of all this stuff. One grant, which I've shared in the past, supports our tutors. So we have reading tutors and math tutors. We have a certified, actually, got lucky with a reading tutor at the middle school this year. So we are putting those things in place, and with the IAM platform, which I know Chad, even the middle school is starting to put those specific data points. We're talking a lot about progress monitoring and having a critical. We are putting things in place to kind of, our hope is that will start
And I know that, I mean, listen to you know, it every month, and I know that you are. I just kind of wanted to highlight that.
Yeah.
For those that don't sit through our meetings.
No, I appreciate that question, because sometimes when we're living it, we know what we're doing, but that kind of question allows us to kind of articulate that a little bit clearer, so thanks for
And
that.
Rita, I'm glad that you alluded and started to talk a little bit more about the birth control concerns too. So presently just to be mindful that, yes, we want to move past COVID, but also we're still seeing the effects. So currently in our preschool program, we have a high need, a high identification rate for special education, and a high referral rate as those effects are still occurring.
Yeah, so Rita hit on a couple things. I was jotting some notes as Brian was asking questions and everybody else was chiming in. I think the new programs do take time to implement, and while the data is kind of all over the place, when you look at from a district perspective, we haven't really had a dip, which many districts see when they implement new programs. So while the grade by grade cohort kind of is all over the place, when I'm looking at it from more of a kind of balcony view district level, we haven't seen a dip. But my hope is that with these new programs, after they've been implemented, we start to see more of a steady incline, because it does kind of look like we've plateaued a little bit. So that will be interesting. We've referenced the use of data through the ION platform, which is powerful. Something that we haven't really talked too much about that I think we can leverage a little bit more and continue to improve is the use of interim assessments. So there's a powerful teaching tool that we can be providing our students with access and opportunity to be best prepared for these types of assessments. And not that we want to teach to the test, because these interim assessments are just great learning opportunities that can be guided by our staff. And something else that I think can't go, we can't say enough about the power and the possibilities is our inclusion efforts. We're taking students and making sure that they're getting the highest quality tier 1 instruction with high expectations alongside their grade level peers. This is not something where they're going to be in resource rooms getting material that is not at the same level. So I think that we are going to see our students rise to those expectations, and that too will take time, but I'm excited about the possibilities. This next graph is interesting. This is something that is through the EdSite platform we talked about in the summer. We actually had the State Department of Education come out and talk to us about some of the ways that they project. And this is not the nicest graph for us to look at as district administrators. It takes two particular classes and based on their performance over the years shows them where they will trend towards. So in the first one, when they were third graders, it shows that they're in that level 3 band, which, you know, kind of is the proficient level. And if they continue to grow at the rate that they've demonstrated, it will put them in level 2, which is not where we want them to be. So this is not necessarily a positive outlook, but it shows that we need to start paying close attention to your point, Brian, and things that Rita has pointed out with our careful attention to the multi-tiered system of supports and the constant analysis of data through ION and all the different teaching strategies that we're looking to enhance. Go ahead, Sherry.
I have a question about the previous, well, it's going back 2 slides. Yes, that's the one. My first question is, how does Connecticut as a state compare with other states as far as percentages of their students at or above grade level?
That's something we can.
We could get that.
Yeah.
We tend to fare pretty high in the state of Connecticut when it's compared to scores, but I don't have that. Do you have that?
No, and not all states use the Smarter Balance assessments. So it would be difficult. I think something that might be better as a tool to compare would be, you know, more SATs and things of that nature.
Yeah. Okay, but there's, do all students take SATs?
All juniors are offered SATs.
Right, but they don't
That's
all
our
take
junior
that.
assessment. So
That's
if
our junior.
if they don't take it, they have to take, like, they have to do like another test their senior year.
But if you're interested, Sherry, for more cross-state comparisons, we can see what we can pull up.
That would be great. And the other thing is, are we, regardless of how we compare with other states, are we happy with 51% being our highest group passing?
So so if we were looking at the top right-hand corner over there, Sherry, is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, I just, I'm concerned.
So that's the 51% is the state.
Right.
So yes, we're not much higher at 56, but again, that's not 56% passing. That's in level 3 or 4. But I would agree with you in that we're never happy with where we are. We're always looking to constantly grow and improve. But we can be pleased still with the improvements that we're seeing in certain cohorts, like Rita pointed out. If you track that, grade 4 cohort going from 61% to 66. So
there's improvement there, but I'm just concerned about how many are at grade.
yeah, so I guess this is a great time to model some difficult conversations. What number would make you happy?
75% of our students
Okay,
are
so
at grade level or
yeah, so the state
above.
does put out districts of distinction based on their performance. So that might be an interesting thing that I can easily get for you, is to show you the districts that perform at that level. What will be interesting, and I pointed this out in a previous budget presentation, most of the districts that are in districts of distinction for high performing are the districts that pay the most per student. The
Well, I
per
guess-
pupil expenditures.
Right, I understand how that does. factor
Darien,
Yeah.
Fairfield, Westbrook. So not to say we can't get there, and it's actually one of Rita and I were talking about trying to give the admin team even more insight into like my vision. And one of the things I want to see us do within the next 3 to 5 years is I want our schools to be schools of distinction, either for performance or growth, because they do it for both. So I can get you some of that information so you see what the numbers look like.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
As a former teacher, dishing out the curriculum, I would be very concerned if my students only were performing at 51%.
Yeah, and I think that's tricky if you're trying to compare it to like the traditional grading system. A 51 is a fail.
Well, on the curriculum that they're supposed to be exposed to and master.
Yeah.
I would be concerned, but I also understand that we take whomever walks through our door, and not all of them are on grade level to begin with. I do understand that dilemma. As a 7th and 8th grade teacher, I have had many students come to me at a 4th or 5th grade reading level, and it's next to impossible to bring them up to grade level.
Yeah, and I think your question is a nice segue to this next slide, because this one talks about math growth. So that you could see that the numbers are higher, much higher in some grade levels. The state has really shifted, not away from performance, because performance is still important, but really to more of a growth model. And you can see that some of our grade levels are really hitting the mark there.
And that's how our already diagnostic exhibit growth as well as.
And that's very important, yes.
Can I just make one little point on that slide? Historically, maybe those of you that have been here a while will have remembered this, but that 6th grade, for some reason, that 6th grade always tank. And I know that we have made a lot of changes within the curriculum, but it's so interesting to me that even with a brand new curriculum, or curriculum in general, and teachers all on the same kind of wavelength, that we're still seeing that even with a year behind our belts or under our belts with this new reading program, we're still kind of hitting that same brick wall. But then again, consistently, 7th grade, we kind of recover. So I just think I'm sure that's something that your teams have kind of looked at, but historically in this district, 6th grade has had that challenge.
Well, and that's interesting if I could back us up a little bit, right? So if you look at 22-23, grade 6 at 49% at or above grade level, they went up to 63.
64. Yeah.
64. So it's a.
Oh yes. 64.
So if you look across at, it's just a different cohort of kids. They performed much better than the previous year. But if you look diagonally, those kids did grow the next year. So the data, it's interesting. It can be, it can give you headaches when you try to analyze it, but we take pride in trying to take all those points into consideration.
And we really look at, there's a lot of pieces to that too. We know that a program is a program, but the teacher is the one that delivers it. So when we think about, sixth grade, there's been a teacher change.
Yeah.
One that she's spent many summers with myself and Erica working and when you think about 55%, there are some teachers in that cohort, in that grade, that had 92% passing. So what we're doing is we're having at these meetings, we're asking that teacher to share with the other teachers what are some those conversations are really important to have. We don't want to have these comparisons with teachers, but they're important conversations. And it goes back to our goal, which was to have your observations being open, letting people share, because we want success in the whole grade, not just one teacher. So those conversations are happening,
And the student attendance, the emphasis on that, and the inclusion should also augment that.
Can I speak just for 1 minute? Sorry. I think standards to change at grade 6, and that always plays a role. And then the other piece I wanted to say too is, our 5th grade has always historically shown a really high growth rate, and that does not help the 6th grade. You see something, take that growth in 5th grade, and then in 6th grade, it's like, how much more can they go? So just to put that out there in terms of growth, but yeah, absolutely we'll continue to work on it.
All right.
Build off of that, if I'd be remiss if I didn't say it, I think the sixth grade year over end, and year to year over end had showed the most growth out of all of our grade level at the middle school. So I was particularly pleased with the efforts of that group.
And going back to what Rita talked about, we're highlighting smarter balanced assessments. One data point, that we have iReady, we have all these other pieces that we could bring into the fold, but it would make for something that would be a very unmanageable presentation in a board meeting. So let's move on to ELA.
And we just, we tried to keep for consistency the same type of format. So this again is showing it now specific to language arts, and you can see that mostly all the scores, if you compare the 22 to the 23, from the 23 to 24, most every grade pretty much except for one went up with students that scored either at or above proficiency. And again, across the grades were above the state average.
And if I could go back to Sherry, your point being well taken, you should see that we've shifted and made more of an emphasis on math with math interventionists and different things that we're trying to focus on because our ELA numbers are better than our math.
And just as a note, that was the same in my previous.
Yeah.
Yeah, language arts does tend to have.
Yeah.
And then again, this is just like in math, but for ELA, our districts, all of the grades together. And then this again is the cohort following that color. And again, most of the cohorts, this is a little bit more cleaner than the mathematics was in regards to showing the improvement across the grades.
And here's that kind of trajectory chart that the state puts out, and you could see that now we have one group in the level 2 and one in the 3. But as you can see, and this is something that I didn't point out before, that the expectation of their scale score there grows. You could see the bars always are moving up. So the state has this expectation that there should be continued improvement even while the expectations are increasing.
And highlighting the importance of targets, you can see again that 5th and 7th grade growth is pretty significant. And then as compared to the state. And then finally, our science, our MTSS assessments, which are only happen once a year, state required, but they only happen in 3 grades. So you can see in 5th, we are at the 64%, and then in grade 11 and 8th, again above the state average. 11th grade has been the particular grade that we have looked at more closely because the scores are seen in the 40s when I first started on, and we've made a couple of tweaks which we've shared in the past. So those scores continue to go up. If you can see across the district too, if you go to the next slide, again, we are above the state averages. And so now these assessments that are going to be shared by the buildings are done 3 times a year. Another data point when we talk about individualizing what student needs are, we don't just dig into our SBAC scores, we also look at these assessments that occur during the school year, specifically with elementary middle school students.
So iReadies are diagnostic that we give to students in 1st through 4th grade 3 times a year, and our kindergartners twice a year in the winter and the spring. So we have 2 numbers on each of these. So the first number, so for example, grade 1, 14%. When you look at iReady, you can look at the standard view, which is basically, this is where your students are when they come to understanding grade level content. So a 1st grader, right now, we have 14% of our 1st graders who have really reached all the 1st grade content. The number in parentheses, if you change the view on iReady to beginning year view, that's the number of students that are where they need to be this time of year. So it's a little tricky. So the 14% is this is where we're starting, and we hope by the end of the year that number goes way up, and it will go way up because they're learning the 1st grade curriculum. But we know that 94% of our students right now are where they need to be in 1st grade. So that's why you see the 2 numbers.
And then on the ELA, for the ELA, and the second column is the math scores for the beginning of the school year. Some of our grade levels start iReady within the 2nd to 3rd week of school too, and some of them, as I'm 2nd grade, just completed some of their math assessments and ELA assessments as well. But again, we are seeing a shift with the math, but you will also see in the parentheses that beginning of the year view.
And MCAS Dibbles is a universal screen that is mandated by the state for our year. Last year was our 1st year implementing MCAS, and this wasn't something where we had a lot of time to decide which which universal screen we wanted to use. So we had decided on MCAS, and last year was really just giving it. We didn't dive too much into the data. We didn't have full professional development on it. It was our 1st year. This year we've had professional development on it, so we are using it a lot more as far as like guided on instruction and our tier intervention groups, which we'll talk about later. But these are the scores for each of the subtests. If there's an NA, that's because that grade level does not test in that area. So this is just our baseline where we are right now, and then obviously these scores will go up as the year goes on.
So looking at the middle school, very similarly, we have 2 different kinds of data points. I do want you to note on the left, it's something to consider that students, such as I'll go with students in grade 7, ELA, that is the percentage of students who are already at grade level, so that's something to definitely celebrate. The differentiation that happened in 6th, 5th grade is definitely successful, but our numbers are definitely where we would like them to be. And what I love too is that this will show us where tier 1 is at, so we can see for our MTSS process where we need to focus our efforts on the tier 2 and 3. So we're definitely happy with the beginning of year data. As I mentioned, those standards change come 6th grade, but certainly we are ready, and that data from iReady is good to help us drive our instruction, and we take the time to data dive. Absolutely, the teachers know where they're at, and all of these data points, as I just looked, are higher than last year, and that's something to certainly celebrate and be happy about.
And so what do we do with all this data, right? What does this data mean for us? And like you said, what are our actual action steps? So, yes.
So we have a focus on our phonics instruction this year with the implementation program. It's all green on ed reports. The kids are enjoying it. It's hands-on. So we're hoping to see some big improvements in our M-class scores just based on the introduction of phonics curriculum in our school.
And we saw the growth for utilizing the piloted method in first grade, and we saw the results in first grade too. Second bullet point, implementation of My New Literacy in K through 4. So that new reading and writing program is in full swing. And as I shared before, we had our recent parent workshop, and we'll continue with professional development throughout the year for this new reading program.
We're also focusing on our Tier 2 intervention within the classroom. This is a slow rollout, so we have to understand that our teachers at the elementary school have a new phonics program, a new reading program, a new writing program, and a new T-Val, and new assessment. So it's a lot of new, and we know.
Not forced by us.
Yeah, because of the state. We do know how important Tier 2 is, and there should be a big focus on it, where we have lots of things in place. We have time, we have instructional resources, we have assessments. We're just slowly rolling it out. So we hope by the new year that's completely in place, but we have to understand that teachers are very overwhelmed right now with all of the new and just getting to know the new program. That is definitely a big action step that we have.
So continuing on with professional learning too, with ongoing mathematics. So we're in implementation, and the professional learning continues, including this Friday where teams will get to work with a consultant and do some data diving as well. And then our team will be discussing some initiatives for the math program.
And then we'll be using the M-Class Stibbles. The M-Class is the program to drive our intervention needs. So again, we had some professional development at the beginning of the year on how to use the data and how to set growth goals for our students. There's built-in interventions right into the program. It groups students for you. It has so many possibilities. So the teachers are really excited. They just dove into their M-Class data last week for the first time. They love the worksheets that we use to do that. It made sense to them, and they were so excited that they had intervention resources right at their fingertips. So that will be something that they're excited about. And again, it was a lot of hands-on intervention for them.
I shared earlier too that we have that emphasis on that collective efficacy where we're working with teams, we're planning together, we have that shared reviewing the programs, and also sharing too how things are working in one classroom and how we can implement them in another classroom. So we do have that emphasis this year.
And we'll also be utilizing team teaching for ELA and math, especially with the rollout of new programs, having an instructional teacher team teaching to learn the program, and utilizing the most effective strategies within the program will be really helpful.
Can I move forward? Yes, all right. So some really great next steps for us at LMS. I do want to point out that we had some significant gains from last year. I think a lot of it was motivation, putting Mr. Johnson on the roof. All kinds of stuff really showed that our students and their buy-in is so pivotal to our success. But these are things we're going to continue and work on to heighten that success. So first of all, we have now this year a reading tutor, we have a math specialist, and as well as our teachers and coach will be working through our MTSS model, which is wonderful because we're trying to target every student that is below grade level, and we're able to do that with the new, with our MTSS period, but with WIN, which is a brand new thing, a lot of people were questioning what that was, we have the ability to target students who are maybe not available during MTSS, as well as do some enrichment for WIN, because we have students that are above grade level and they deserve to do some cool stuff. So we have our WIN period for that, and that'll be really helpful and really significant.
Erica, what does WIN stand for?
What I need.
What I need, thank you.
Yeah. So what I need, what's interesting is kids had a study hall beforehand. So some kids were like, well, we're just going to do our schoolwork. But what we're trying to go to is certainly time where they can meet with the teacher, whose support they can get during that time because they struggle with an assignment. But also we have our computer teacher working on typing, or we have our our tech ed teacher working on other STEM activities, and that's been great. But what I love too is that if a student can't access MTSS for intervention, they can do that during WIN. So we kind of have these two periods, if you want to. Okay. We have our inclusion model, so where our special education students were pulled out, as Chad mentioned, it was a very high percentage of students pulled out and not in the regular ed classroom. And so now, all of them being in the tier 1, it's definitely been a learning experience for our teachers. But now they're being exposed and they're being able to see those grade level standards and they're getting it, and it's wonderful, and our teachers are learning that differentiation. When it comes to progress monitoring, for our MTSS model, we have teachers in specifically ELA, we're using the DIBBLs that will see where our students are going and how they're improving during our MTSS process to have that universal screener to see how they're improving in their reading comprehension, as well as those IABs that Andy mentioned. Taking those, using those are very similar to the SBAC, and that is, and as the state has said, it's very indicative of how they'll do on the SBAC at the end of the year. We have our personalized path through our iReady, which is wonderful. During that time where a student is not required tiered intervention and they're not getting that enrichment, or maybe they're not on that cycle or they're not in health, they are given time to work on their personalized path, which is wonderful because it takes what they need literally in the pathway from iReady and gives them assignments that are totally assigned or aligned to the standards that they're missing. And that's again for both math and ELA. So we are definitely working on getting those minutes they need to have. We have a new ELA consultant who is very well versed in SBAC and data collection and data analysis. She's already actually pushed us to do some learning walks, which will be exciting in the next coming weeks, to visit other classrooms to check out, in terms of volume of writing, close reading, and other kind of reading choice materials, which has been great. But we're also continuing our work with the math consultants from iReady. We have coaches from the Science Center, and we are all, as a collective in our building, working on aligning to those standards and analyzing our data and making those informed decisions. Finally, something that we are implementing in full this year is when it comes to our different cycles, we are meeting with all of our teams in terms of the reading and the math teacher with our interventionists, our administration, our guidance counselor, and we are talking about who needs tiered interventions for what and for why. And what I think is powerful is that we do have students who do have needs that are social emotional. We have kids with trauma needs that need to get those taken care of, and we can have those conversations of where kids are at and why. And those days are great where we can kind of, in a way, figure out who needs what at what time, and when, and then put that into our ION platform that was mentioned so we can carry on with them. But that day is really collaborative and we move forward knowing who's getting intervention and for what. So I think that'll definitely help our tier 2 and tier 3 kids.
So, this is just a summary of what was discussed. As you can tell, you didn't see any specific building data for the high school because they're getting ready for PSATs in 2 weeks. So in our winter one, as we always do, you'll get more high school data from that. But this is just a summary of what was discussed from the previous schools. I just want to also thank Stephanie and Erica who stayed late to help, and they also chimed into a lot of the slides and to all the administration that contributed to the presentation. Any questions? I know that's a lot of information or something that you want to take back, and in fact would be happy to.
I have one question. Rita, do parents still have the option of opting out of SBAC assessment? So is that something that came out of the pandemic, or was that?
I was always
No,
there.
it was actually before the pandemic, and then it hasn't been happening. It was prior to the pandemic.
Do you normally get a large percentage?
No, not at all.
Just curious.
When I was not in this, actually since I've been in this role, maybe 2 people, and the whole thing is I've been prior. I just knew as a principal when we had a conversation
All right, thank you, everybody, for the presentation. I will work to get a couple of those additional report and comparison models to share with you all, and I can put those into weekly updates, and then if you have any questions from there. So I'll move on with the superintendent report. Town newspaper, the first submission was put forth. I thought that the selectman's office and Sarah Hill down there did a great job of taking our submission and putting it into a nice concise report that we look forward to the town being able to enjoy. I did take time to try to introduce the LPS 2030 strategic plan to them, and then we have QR codes that lead them to all the building newsletters. So that's something we'll look forward to doing. Our next submission is actually October 16th, so it's going to be kind of a mid-month submission, so looking forward to that. Class size report at your place setting, you do have a detailed class size report that was put together by Chelsea. It shows you what our enrollment is in each grade and section within our district. Please let me know if you have any questions. I know that was something that was routinely provided to you, but it's also timely because there was conversation around class size as it tied into the school study. Speaking of the school study, the SLAM Collaborative will be doing their final presentation. This is something that you're hearing before it's even been put out by the town, but it will be October 30th. And I believe they are aiming for a 7 o'clock presentation here in the auditorium. But please be on the lookout for an official notice of that meeting from the town.
And there should also be a question and answer period at the end. So if you go, you may ask questions.
Yeah, and the presentation is really going to focus on the findings of that extensive study along with the committee's recommendations for next steps. And then the last thing on the report from the superintendent was the long-term planning committee. Long-term planning committee made recommendations to the Board of Finance to use town budget surplus to complete several projects across the town. Specific to the schools, we had $120,000 for new access control and $227,000 for a technology catch-up plan. There's a meeting tomorrow night at 7 o'clock in the Jonathan Trumbull Library Community Room. So that is something we'll eagerly await results from that meeting and look forward to putting those funds to good use should they come our way. Any questions on the remainder of the superintendent report? Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna let the student reps take off for the
Sure.
Okay, thank you guys. Hi, Martha.
Hi.
Hey, Martha.
Move on to the did anybody have any questions? All right, we'll move on to the finance report, 24-25 budget.
No, nothing of significance to report at this time. We're still kind of early in the school year. We are trending, our 5-year average is trending, 67.63% for the historical comparison. So, we're not too far off the mark. Right now, we have about 70% remaining. There's no real new surprises other than we did implement a new system. So, for the non-lapsing, with the projects that had been voted on so far, taking those into consideration, we'd be down to $89,962. With expenses that have actually been paid to date, we're at $152,000. But again, there are projects that are in the works and we'll be getting invoiced for them probably later this month.
Thanks, Martha. I did add a few other things to the finance report, just more as a heads up to you. We were recently informed by our school readiness liaison that we had the opportunity, something that was being provided statewide, to apply for more school readiness seats. In that process, if we're able to get the additional seats that Rita applied for, 5 extra, we would get more funding in our grant, which would help us offset costs for school readiness, early childhood education, specifically in pre-K. So we'll keep you posted on how that application goes. I also did put something in there about the ASTE grant changes. This is more just kind of a sticker shock thing that I didn't want anybody on the board to be surprised with. So the 23-24 ASTE grant, there was 452,000. The 24-25 grant is 744,000, but it's specifically to compensate for the fact that the state changed the tuition percentages for sending schools. So we were getting a lot of that money either way. It's just a matter of, was it coming through the grant or was it coming through tuition? So I didn't want anyone thinking like, oh, wow, we came into $300,000 extra dollars. That's not the case. We did get some additional funding, which is great, but the large lion's share of it is going towards the offset of tuition.
That makes sense. Thanks for that heads up. Any questions for Martha for the finance report, non-lapsing? No?
Thanks, Martha.
All right, thank you. All right, we have a few policies for the first reading. Did you need to speak to any of them, Brian?
No, we've gone through all of them. Those are all the ones I mentioned last month that we're
Okay.
back up, so.
Anybody have any questions on that? All right, we'll move on to the action items. We have act on a letter of resignation.
Motion to accept the letter of resignation with regret.
Motion by Nicole, seconded by Brian. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. Act on the use of non-lapsing funds for Lens Solution. Yes, Mr. Gonzalez.
So I'll give you a little bit of background. We had applied for a safety and security grant. That's how we got the original installation of the lockdown emergency notification system in all of our schools. When we went to pay for that and to get the reimbursable amount from the state, they let us know that we actually had more funding from the state available to us. So we went back to Eastern Datacom, got an additional proposal to get some of the things that we were not able to get in the first installation because of limited funds. The lens, additional strobes and horns for the lens solution came to $30,894, which 58% of that will be reimbursed by the state. So I am here to ask the board if we could approve up to $14,000 from the non-lapsing account for additional lens software solutions.
Which that will not be reimbursed. That's
The 14 is our share. So in order to get the 58%, we have to spend the 42.
All right, is there a motion on the floor? Or
motion
any, yeah, go ahead, sorry, Nicole.
Motion to approve up to $14,000 of the non-lapsing fund for the lens solution.
Second.
Motion by Nicole, seconded by Brian. Any discussion?
Well, I'm just glad we're doing it. Yeah, exactly.
Any other further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously. Action item number 3, act on the superintendent evaluation tool. Is there a motion on the floor?
Can I just say so moved?
Yes, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Dawn. Motion by Dawn, seconded by Nicole. Dawn, would you mind speaking to this for a few minutes?
Yep, really briefly. If you remember when we first looked at this, we wanted a couple of months to just kind of feel it out, and we have reached our couple of months. The nothing after talking with Andy last week and then earlier today, nothing significant has changed, or nothing has changed since we last spoke. Last time we spoke, standard number 7 was going to have academic, the word academic removed, which it did. I realized on my cheat sheet that I handed out, it did not, so I already removed it, so you won't see it again. 7.1 is specific to academic progress, so clearly it stayed there. And there was a desire to include social emotional progress, so there is now a 7.2 that addresses social emotional progress, and it reads, it's pretty much a copy and paste of academic progress with social emotional in there. And then anything that was 7.2 and below just moved down a number. That is all.
Thanks, Dawn. Any questions? No? Andy, you happy with that?
Happy.
All right. All those in favor of approving the new superintendent evaluation tool, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much, and thank you, Dawn, for the work on that, and Andy, you as well. All right, items for next agenda. No? Okay, we will need to be reorganizing, elections next month, so please contemplate that, consider, be ready for November.
I do have one. So we'll start the mid-year eval in December. So maybe just a little bit of time to review the process.
Okay. And
Not
will you
long.
send an email?
Yeah, I can do that. I mean, we might not even have to
Executive
discuss it,
session,
but
right?
yeah, usually I send an email, but.
Okay. We wouldn't need an executive, I don't
No.
think, until after we get
Right.
the
This is
results.
just to talk about the process.
Just process.
Okay. Process. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, and if anything else comes up between now and then, just let us know. All right. We will adjourn at 8:50.